so excited to introduce Dr. Myron Belfer. Myron is professor of psychiatry in the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and he's a senior associate in psychiatry at the Children's Hospital of Boston. Dr. Belfer is a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and he is on the affiliated faculty of the Harvard Center for the Developing Child. So excited to have him here. He has been a mentor of mine and just a real beacon for hope in my own life. So it's great to have him presenting and sharing his insights and work to date on hope. And then we have Kristy Stark. Kristy is a behavioral scientist, a licensed K-12 administrator, board-certified behavioral analyst, consultant, and entrepreneur. Kristy has served as the clinical director of a nonprofit organization for children with neurodevelopmental disorders and as a consultant to the state mental health agencies and university teaching centers. Kristy was an instructor in the clinical psychology at the University of Michigan and is now adjunct faculty in Pennsylvania. Kristy holds an master's in education and human development and psychology from Harvard, where she co-founded an educational technology startup at the Harvard Innovation Lab. She has served as a board member on the Harvard Graduate School of Education, Innovation and Ventures in Education organization, and on the leadership team for the Behavioral Insights student group at the Harvard Kennedy School. She additionally holds an MA from the University of Michigan and a BA from OSU. Kristy has presented her work at Harvard University, the University of Michigan, and the United Nations headquarters in New York City. She has spoken internationally on child development, mental health, and behavioral insights and design. Kristy is passionate about disseminating evidence-based, prevention-focused programs for children and families. I'm so thrilled to have them both here with me.
I'm pleased to be here today and want to talk about hope from my experience. In other words, both clinically and from research that all the three of us have done together. Hope is essential to living a healthy and productive life, no matter what one's circumstances are. When one has a life-threatening illness, been the subject of trauma, been displaced by war, or suffered from other adversities, hope makes a difference in the quality of life for the individual and outcomes. What can now be understood about hope is that it is more than some amorphous concept. It can be operationalized and now has been demonstrated to be teachable. Kathryn Goetzke and Kristy Stark will provide the details of both research and programs that have operationalized hope. My interest in hope arose from two experiences. As a psychiatrist, I made rounds in tertiary care hospitals that cared for patients with extraordinary illnesses. Working with a particular reconstructive surgeon who later won the Nobel Prize, Dr. Joseph Murray, I observed how he never discussed prognosis, but always emphasized that there was more to be done on next surgery and next treatment. Without saying so, he offered hope to his patients that there was a future, a far better clinical intervention than the one I could have offered as a psychiatrist. You may be interested, as an aside, to read his remarkable book called The Soul of the Surgeon. The same experience has been documented over and over again in the oncology literature regarding the outcomes for patients who've experienced significant malignancies. My second experience, and the one that led me to meet Kathryn Goetzke, was working in China after the 2008 Sichuan earthquake. A dedicated couple, Vicky and Malcolm Aw, had established a series of libraries for children displaced or orphaned by the earthquake. This initiative morphed into a program to expose children via satellite TV or in in-person interviews to individuals who had overcome various adversities to achieve success in their lives. The program, called I Dream, was remarkably successful in addressing the despair of the affected children and has been embraced by many school systems throughout China. It is used as both a preventive program and for children who are in difficult circumstances. This program gained some attention at the National Institute of Mental Health here in the US and at the World Health Organization. And that is where I met Kathryn Goetzke, who has devoted her life to providing hope to others and supported the innovative educational programs that you will hear about. I met Kristy Stark while she was a master's student at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Her analytic mind and sharp questioning of the ideas related to hope has helped us to sharpen our thinking and influence the program. What is truly unique about hope, as we have come to understand it, is the easier to understand than resilience. Resilience is often spoken about in ways that obscure our ability to understand what we really want the outcomes to be. It can be understood more, hope can be understood more precisely by those being engaged in programming, and it can be operationalized and evaluated in a way that resilience cannot be. It has been inspiring for me to work with Kathryn and Kristy, and I think that what you'll hear about next should be inspirational. Thank you.
So we're really interested in hope as an independent variable because we have seen a lot in different research literature that we've covered that people are interested in hope and they look at hope as sort of an aside in their research. But we really wanted to understand what hope is as an independent variable and if it's something that we could teach. So Nobel Prize winning economist James Heckman argues that beyond academic knowledge, non-cognitive factors are the most important for life success and also social mobility in the labor market. Non-cognitive factors, which are behaviors, skills, attitudes, and strategies, these are things that are really crucial to students' academic performance and their adjustment. Far beyond just, basic language and math learning in school. These non-cognitive factors are really critical. There are decades of research on the myriad factors tied to academic and job market success, but we really don't know how all of them fit together. So we saw an opportunity here in understanding that hope predicts academic outcomes, including GPA, which is really powerful when you think about in the K-12 sector in schools, that we should be thinking more about these non-cognitive factors and what we can do to best support young children to prepare them for the stressors of later life and adulthood. We know that hope is positively correlated with adjustment, and we know it's positively correlated with economic success, but obviously correlation is not strong enough, and that's why we're really interested in thinking more about causation and defining hope. So when we dug into the research, we covered a lot of different sources, the theoretical research, oncology literature, trauma literature, theological literature, and then also the suicide literature and program development. That's where the bulk of our information came from. So one of the main challenges we saw was differentiating hope from a variety of other terms and constructs. So differentiating hope from expectation, resilience, optimism, and agency is really critical to understanding what hope is on its own. Understanding hope not only with individuals impacted by adversity, but also recognizing that hope is powerful and important for all people, regardless of the level of adversity they've experienced in their life. We also want to understand how hope develops within an individual and also how it can be measured. So in hope theory, there are a variety of sources. We looked at Erickson, who believed hope is made possible through the development of trust. Mrazek and Mrazek see hope as an orientation to life that permeates personal characteristics in fostering resilience. Also, there's a sense of moral and social order embodied in key cultural values. And we know that a positive motivational state directing perseverance toward goals and pathways is an important element of hope. So some of the outcomes that are fascinating are that there are actually survival advantages to being hopeful. We know the placebo effect is important, and remarkably, hope has been connected to having patients have a delay of death. So we know that hope is very powerful beyond just being something that makes people feel good mentally, that it actually can have physiological impacts. We know that it has an improved immune system and active coping, like high hope individuals bounce back from distress and are more resilient, and also having a positive future orientation and an amelioration of the negative impact of poverty. And that last one is really important in a population I'm working with and supporting, level the playing field for young children in adversity. So this is a powerful finding. Something that is important that we've uncovered is that hope is not something that can be given, but rather we can create a conversational space for hope to arise and for people to discover hope on their own. It's something that needs to be worked through in dialogue and in a transactional relationship. So we know that having an expectation that is desired and possible is an important element of hope. It's not just defined as someone that is optimistic about the future, but that they're thinking about something they desire and also something that is possible or feasible. And hope is not equivalent to the expectation of a favorable outcome. So we want to differentiate this from optimism, and that is the definition of optimism. So another important construct, especially in the educational literature recently, has been resilience. And what we think is really interesting and very timely in terms of the work people are doing in resilience is that we found resilience is likely an outcome of having hope. And so that really led us to question what we can do with hope and if it's something that we could teach to people so that they could have a number of positive outcomes related to hope. So the foundation for hope levels we found very interesting that it begins to form in early childhood. So this highlights the importance of shaping hope in young children. Also, the individual asset of hope is correlated with health and educational outcomes. And there are a number of hope scales, which I don't think we'll show today, but there are a number that can help us understand hope levels within an individual. And some observations, we know that there's positive coping with cancer treatment. We know trauma survivors, it fuels energies to rebuild their lives. And in suicide, the youth perspective is that, the rates of suicide are climbing, and being hopeful helps young children to have choices, to have a dream, and to look toward the future. Theologically, hope is seen to allow an escape from despair. And Erickson and others propose that hope is the most fundamental experience one can have as a human being, and that it begins to be formed early in life.
All right, excellent. Thank you to both of you for going through a lot of the research around hope. I run a nonprofit in mental health and was looking at developing a program specific to see if we could actually prevent depression and anxiety in the first place. And so started doing research around what are the primary symptoms for in depression, and then trying to research the opposite of that. So when we look at hopelessness is actually a leading predictor of suicide, and it's the #1 symptom of depression. And as we had mentioned throughout the day, suicide is now the leading cause of death globally for teen girls. 1 out of 9 students are self-reporting suicide attempts before graduating high school. And these are self-reported attempts. So in every classroom, there are 3 kids that feel that hopeless, that they try to take their lives. 40% of those in grade school, so it's happening younger and younger now. There was a study in the US, 36% of adolescent girls were self-reporting depression and feeling depressed. In a recent, that's 1 in 3 girls with depression. The numbers among boys were 13%, so much less for boys. And then in looking at violence in youth, 1 in 4, which is 25% of a study of violence in youth, reported levels of hopelessness with at least enough to bother them in the previous month. So 1 in 4 youth are feeling very hopeless. Moderate levels of hopelessness exhibited an independent relationship with a range of violence-related outcomes for subgroups. So when you look at delinquent behavior, they're hopeless, weapon carrying on school property, and all forms of self-directed violence have high levels of hopelessness. And there's a correlation between hopelessness and interpersonal and intimate partner violence. There's also significantly higher percentages of lesbian, gay, or bisexual students. 63% in students not sure of their sexual identity, 46.3% that experience significant feelings of sadness or hopelessness. So it's much higher in these populations. It's a largely overlooked consequences of race-related discrimination, the feelings of hopelessness, and there's reports of childhood. The reports of childhood emotional abuse were associated with elevated levels of hopelessness and depressive symptoms. So hopelessness affects a lot of different populations and groups, and by addressing this hopelessness, hopefully we can also address and improve some of these issues, some of these other issues as well. So we looked at the opposite of hopelessness, which is hope, and the research, as they pointed out, suggests it's a teachable skill, and higher hope we touched on corresponds to greater emotional and psychological well-being, better academic performance, less stress, less loneliness, better social connection, less anxiety, and enhanced personal relationships. And again, the research supports that hope can be taught, and the greater the level of hope, the greater the level of well-being. So that's kind of the basis of why we created this curriculum, and we targeted the age group of 7 to 10-year-old children because of the increase in anxiety and depressive symptoms that happen in the 11 and onward age. And so we wanted to get something at this critical age, focus on that, and then work to expand the program as we were able. So we have a free program. It's free, it's available globally, and I see hope as a key fundamental core to happiness and having a happy society and culture. So our program is free, it's available to all. We have 12 core lessons that we teach students with social and emotional learning tools and how to develop and maintain hope really throughout all of life's challenges, because there's so much we can't control, but there are some things internally we can do to help maintain and sustain a hopeful mindset. So we've created the program based on leading research that's been done on hope, which has been mentioned today by both Kristy and Dr. Belfer. Each lesson plan has objectives, critical thinking questions, discussion points, hands-on activities, and stories to enhance comprehension. We have supplemental projects as well, and again, they're all online and free for all. We see hope as a human right that everyone deserves to have. And we created the program based on just my experience in business and background in business and seeing a lot of programs come and go because they're not sustainable. So we created something that was scalable so that we could develop the 7 to 10 core age range and then expand it out globally to groups, so taking into account for cultural adaptations that may be needed. We have stories with each of the lesson that can be adapted to different cultures, but we have run it in Malaysia. They didn't see the need to change the stories, but they're using it in really all over the world. Let's see, it can be used universally, so we don't need to single anyone out, which is really important when you talk about creating a happier and more hopeful society. If you're pulling kids out of classes to do behavioral modifications, that's not the best way to develop a skill set and look at overall mental health and ending stigma of mental health. Hope affects everyone, and so everyone can use these hope skills. We focus on prevention. Again, before the age of 10 is such a critical age for kids. It's also cost effective, so there's a low cost to entry. It's adaptable for different age ranges, and it makes human and financial sense. If you heard the World Bank speak earlier, for every $1 invested, you get $4 back as it relates to mental health intervention. However, we don't know those numbers for prevention yet, but the return on investment would likely be much greater. So we've been featured around the world, featured as an innovation at the World Bank, and we've presented globally on the program itself. We've just now launched a Hope Badge on 7 Cups. 7 Cups is a peer-to-peer support app for people that can connect with other people that have various, so say I have anxiety, I can say I have anxiety, and I want to talk to someone in my age range, someone else that has anxiety and dealt with it. So the peer-to-peer support will connect me. So recommend that you all download 7 Cups and get connected. If you need support for mental health, we know that having at least one person we can talk to goes a long way in addressing our own mental health challenges and supporting other people. They've helped 25 million people around the world in 189 countries. It uses 147 languages. So we'll put a link in the comments, but we have our Hope training on the 7 Cups website. So you can go through the training for free to just kind of learn the fundamental principles on hope and how to bring it into your own life. I use personally the Hope curriculum every day myself, and how to maintain my own hopeful mindset. And then you can also get the Hope badge and then be a supportive listener to other people. And then, so our call to action today is really to bring, if you can, this curriculum to your community, or bring the principles of hope to your community. You can do this traditionally through schools, but you can also do it through health systems, through after-school programs, Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCA, United Way. Just there's so many different ways to bring hope into your community, but I think as they've shown previously that it's a really standalone concept, and really before we teach kids to be resilient, we have to teach them how to create, maintain, and sustain a hopeful mindset and grow that. So that's about all we have on Hopeful Minds. I did want to share that. It's a free resource. Again, it's available to everyone. Hopefulminds.org is the website. And yeah, once you choose hope, anything is possible, says Christopher Reed. And we definitely believe in that. Definitely.
Thank you so much. That was very inspiring and interesting. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions about that, and we will post the questions later to the so the whole talk was about hope, and we have been asking this question at the end of every talk of what brings everybody the most hope for mental health. I don't know, maybe we can do that here as well, even, you know.
Perfect.
So the idea is to ask each one of you what brings you the most hope, the one thing that gives you most hope for the future of mental health.
I'm most hopeful at this point because there's been so much interest in hope. I think there's an unprecedented amount of international discussion about mental health. It's found its way into budgets. It's found its way into the Sustainable Development Goals. It really is quite a unique time in the overall thinking about health in general and mental health in particular.
What brings me a lot of hope is this interest in looking at treating populations before there is the onset of significant distress. And so this focus on, working with younger children on prevention-focused programs and interventions has a lot of potential to have, great impact over time, and to really help ameliorate symptoms before they become, too difficult for the individual.
For me, what brings me the most hope about mental health right now is the fact that we're seeing things that, 50% of the people aren't getting help, and a big reason is stigma. And we are seeing the things that change stigma happen, which is celebrity, leadership, engagement, talking more on the biology of the body, getting the press talking more the positive, the solutions, and what you're doing with the World Happiness Award, which is bringing mental health more mainstream, getting it involved in the mainstream conversation, and focusing again on solutions that we have for it, positive return on investment. So these are all bringing me a ton of hope these days.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so thank you.